guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking through how to become a concert photographer, including beginner tips for cold emailing and getting a photo pass. So your favorite artist just announced that they're going on tour and they have a show near you. You want to go and take photos, so most of the time that means that you're going to need a photo pass. So today I'm going to be breaking down exactly how to get a photo pass, including tips for cold emailing and finding artist contacts. So in this first section, I'm going to be talking about how to get a photo pass. There's usually 3 ways to get a photo pass, which are shooting for a publication, emailing artist management, or bringing in your camera if it's a smaller venue. So I'll go through all these and break them down for you guys. The first way is to find a publication to shoot for, and what this means is that a publication will send you out on assignment to cover a show. So for example, a publication may send you out to cover Taylor Swift's concert, which, hypothetical here because we all know Taylor is strict on press, but say a publication sends you out to cover Taylor's show. So this means that in exchange for you getting a photo pass to shoot the show, you are providing photos to the publication, and then the publication is then providing coverage of Taylor's show for her PR team. This is beneficial for everyone involved because you get to take photos of your favorite artist, your publication gets the photos to use for their coverage, and Taylor's team gets press coverage of her, which is good for her PR. And the next way to get a photo pass is to email artist managers. So this definitely varies by artist and artist team, but usually what this means is that you're shooting for the artist in exchange for photos. So you get the photos for your portfolio and they get the photos for their socials. So if you're familiar with the modeling industry and with test shoots, it kind of works like test shoots in the sense that you get the photos for your portfolio and models get the photos for their book, except in this case, it's just artists getting the show photos for their socials. And then the third way is that a lot of smaller venues will allow you to bring your camera if you have a ticket. So all you have to do is buy a ticket for the artist that you want to shoot, and then you'll be able to bring your camera in. So I haven't done this personally, but this is how a lot of my friends got started with concert photography. So I think that that's something that I definitely recommend, especially if you're already going to see an artist or a band and you just want to bring your camera along. Open mic nights are also great for this because a lot of up-and-coming artists and bands are looking for photos, so this is a great way to network with them and also build your portfolio. And if you're in college, you could also check out your college newspaper, or if there is a publication that you would be able to cover events for, because often there is a lower barrier to entry. Unfortunately, COVID happened for me, so I did not get to do this, but I think that this is a really great way to build your portfolio if you're in college. Most people will say that working for a publication is the easiest way to get a photo pass, and I don't want to discount that, but at least for me personally, that was not the case. At least for me, in my experience, it was a little bit of a chicken and egg situation where publications wanted to see that I had already shot concerts and had kind of concert photography experience, but I wasn't able to get that experience without already being on assignment for a publication. Because at the end of the day, in most cases, it is super difficult to get a photo pass without being on assignment for a publication because there are obviously limited spots on guest lists or limited spots for media, so you're a lot more likely to get approved for a photo pass when you have something to offer in exchange, and most of the time this is press coverage or show coverage for an artist. So for me, because the whole publication press route wasn't working out, I started reaching out to artist managers directly. So that's actually how I got my first 5 or so shows and actually how I was able to shoot my first festival as well. I would say that my path was definitely a little bit more unconventional because I shot my first music festival working directly for an artist, and I also booked my first paid gig before I ever got to work for a publication, which I think most people will tell you is uncommon, but I think that that's just how things worked out for me naturally. So I think that that's definitely something that I can speak to better based off of my own experience getting photo passes. So this video and the advice that I want to share in this video is mostly about how I personally was able to get photo passes. And I will say that now that I've been shooting for a bit, that being on assignment for a publication is definitely the easiest way to get a photo pass, especially for larger artists or for music festivals, where it can be pretty difficult to bring in your camera unless you're an artist crew or you're with press. So now I also want to touch on cold emailing and how to cold email. So before I did concert photography, I was doing portrait photography, so I was doing test shoots for a lot of different modeling agencies in LA and San Francisco. So my portfolio was mostly different kind of fashion, editorial, lifestyle photos that I had accumulated during that time. So when I was cold emailing artist managers and artist teams, this was the portfolio that I was sending them to show that I did have experience with photography. But I think that the big weakness with my portfolio was that I didn't have a lot of low light or event style photography. So when you're emailing artist teams, something to keep in mind is that sometimes artist teams will ask you to pay for tickets if you're just asking for a photo pass and you're not with a publication. I never actually did this, so I can't speak too much on the pros and cons of this, but when I was first starting out, a few management teams did ask if I'd be willing to pay for a ticket and they could give me a photo pass. I think that this is definitely an option if it's an artist you really want to see or you already have a ticket to the show and you want to photograph. But for me, it wasn't worth it at the time because I was able to get photo passes for other artists without having to pay for a ticket. And at the end of the day, when you're shooting a show, it is different than going to a show for fun. So I, at the time, just didn't really want to pay for a ticket when I knew that I'd be working and I wouldn't be able to get the full concert experience. And the primary reason for this, as far as I've seen, is that touring is really expensive. And even a lot of bigger artists who go on tour don't break even. I remember I was seeing a YouTube video of James Hype, who I think is like definitely pretty big in the EDM industry now. And he was talking about how he got paid, I think, over $500,000 to play EDC Vegas main stage one year. And after everything, like the helicopter ride, the flight from Europe, transportation and logistics, everything, he lost money. So I just think that that just goes to show how expensive like touring and the music industry really can be. So I think that that's why a lot of smaller artists and artist teams aren't able to afford to comp your ticket, especially if you don't have much to offer in exchange. However, for smaller artists, giving out photo passes can be a great way for them to get photos to use for socials if they can't afford or don't want to have touring media. And if this is the case, usually the person that you're communicating with, the artist manager or someone on the artist team, will ask if it's okay for them to use your photos on socials, or this is also something that you can mention in emails when you're cold emailing or reaching out to artists and artist teams. I'll film another video about this later in the week, basically just talking through how I would cold email artists and artist teams for a photo pass, and then also sharing the exact template that I use to do that. And this next thing isn't really a tip, but I just want to say to not be afraid of rejection. And I know that it sounds like something that it's really easy for someone to say, but the music industry in general is just full of rejections. And this sounds super, super cliche, but you really only need one yes to change the trajectory of your career. And I'm definitely still coming up as a photographer in the music industry, definitely still figuring out like what I want to do. But when I look back at how far I've come, I can definitely pinpoint a few moments where the yeses did really help me like make that connection or shoot that show or festival, or really help me to get where I am now. So I think that sometimes you really just do have to send out those like 50, 100 emails, get those no's, and then finally someone will say yes. And I just want to say that even if you think it's a long shot, just go for it. Like the worst thing that someone can do is either say no or not answer your email. Like nothing bad is going to happen. It might be kind of awkward, might be kind of embarrassing. Like obviously I don't enjoy hearing no, I don't enjoy hearing like, oh, we went with someone else, but it just kind of is part of that process as you're kind of building your network and coming up as a photographer in the music industry. For context, I shot my first concert in May of this year, and I think by June and July I was able to get photo passes for some pretty big artists whose music I really liked, including Gale, Chase Atlantic, and Dean Lewis. When I first started photography, I didn't even think that'd be possible. I didn't even think that these people would email me back because they're artists that I listen to, I love their music. I think that it's always worth sending that email, it's always worth shooting your shot, because at the end of the day, rejection is just part of the process. You just really have to put yourself out there and shoot your shot to get where you want to go. And something else in line with rejection is don't be afraid to follow up. Sometimes it is super awkward, like sending that second or third email, but honestly, a lot of the times these managers and publicists are getting a ton of emails, so they may not be intentionally ignoring you, they may have just missed your email. A lot of the times, if you aren't getting a response, people either just forgot to respond or they genuinely didn't see your email. So usually what I'll do is I'll email about like 2 weeks to 4 weeks out from a show, and then if I haven't heard back, usually I'll follow up with them again about a week before the show. And then if they've responded to me at some point just to say like, hey, your request is noted, or we'll get back to you, that's when I'll usually make a note to follow up either a day or two before the show, because that means that they've seen my email and they probably have me noted down somewhere on a list. Something else to keep in mind when you're emailing for a photo pass is that approvals can often be very, very last minute. So in my experience, usually the time frame for approvals has been around 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes it can be 48 to 72 hours for bigger artists, but usually you don't hear back until kind of 3 days before a show, especially if an artist is on tour. Usually their management team or their press team is sorting out passes and logistics for earlier tour dates, so they don't usually get around to your date or your show until kind of 3 days before. The only caveat here being that if you're requesting interviews or portraits or something like that, usually you do get more notice because that's something that has to be arranged with the artist team. So in these cases, when I've been doing more coverage, I've been approved for a photo pass up to 2 weeks in advance before the show. And usually they'll note down your request for like an interview or for portraits or for both, but they don't usually get back to you with confirmation for that until 48 to 72 hours before. But that's also something to keep in mind, is that if you are doing an interview or something, you can probably expect to get confirmed, at least for your ticket and photo pass, farther in advance. Sometimes you can also get approved for a photo pass day of. I know people who've gotten approved for photo passes with, I think, like 2 to 3 hours notice, so they had to leave things that they were doing to go to the show. So definitely happens. I think it's just something that is pretty common in the music industry, which is unfortunate because I'm someone who likes to plan ahead. But that's definitely something to keep in mind, is that sometimes publicists are working up until doors open to sort out passes and other logistics for that night's show. This is just a guess, but I feel like this is something that probably happens in more competitive markets like LA and New York, where there are a lot of publications vying for photo passes, so maybe one publication backs out last minute or isn't able to send someone, so then publicists will scramble to find someone else for coverage. So all this is in the context of shows and concerts, usually for music festivals, because it is kind of bigger production, just more scheduling. They'll let you know a week or two in advance whether or not you're approved. And this is also because there's more to organize on their end as well. They want to confirm which publications are approved, who they're sending, and kind of sort out things like passes, COIs, other things like that you don't always need for smaller shows or concerts. However, this does also depend on the festival and who's organizing. I think that the earliest I've been approved for press is, I want to say, 3 weeks in advance, and the most last minute I was approved, I want to say, I think was like 24 hours before the festival, which was definitely very, very last minute. And something that I also noticed when I was doing music festivals this summer is that usually the week leading up to a festival, publicists will start to email. They'll basically just say, hey, we have X, Y, and Z artists. They'll be on site looking to set up press coverage. This is when you can reach out to them if you want to do interviews, portraits, things like that. And this can be a really great way to get additional coverage for your publication and also to meet your favorite artists. So that's everything that I have for today's video. Let me know if you guys have any other questions or if there's any other videos you'd like to see me film.